What is up, everyone? My name is SVCOB. I make electronic music, and I'm going to start this series where I go through all my projects. It's not going to be a full overview breakdown, but more so some lessons that could be taken from this project and help you become, if you're new, better at making music. If you already make music, hopefully you get inspired, try new things, or simply just simplify things. That's the goal here. I want to make super technical stuff very simple, very basic, and very intentional because I went down a rabbit hole about 6 years or so of being so focused on the technical side of making music that I forgot about writing good music. And listen, at the end of the day, the writing has to be good. If the writing's good, it could sound a little off, quality, sound balance wise. That's fine. We could overlook that if the writing's really good. But the writing's not good and it's the most clear, mastered perfectly song, that does you no good either, because just because it sounds good, people listen to music because of the writing and the emotion they feel from listening to it, or the energy, whatever. So the writing's got to be in place. So main focus is always the writing. Just worry about writing 80-90% of your songwriting process. Write the song. The other 10% is going to be the sound quality, and we're going to save that for the end. So tip number one, besides that was basically tip number one. Tip number two then is start to combine things into grouped stems. And this is going to simplify your project so you're not scrolling through 70 tracks or so trying to mix and master and balance a song. Once you get a group balanced, put it together. We could still tweak it later, but we're going to tweak it as a group. This is going to help you start to glue your track together to make it sound like one finished piece instead of a bunch of layers just crammed together. So we have our effects, vocals, drums, trumpet and strings I left separate. I'll explain that when we get to these tracks. Then I have my lead group. I have my pad and arps, again, separated on purpose. Some people put this all together and depends. But for me, I needed them separate at this point because there's still stuff I wanted to do. Then I have my sub and basses put together as my last stem. So now I got 8 tracks. I went from, on this, I think I was at like 40 or something, down to 8. Much easier to manage, and we could start to really be intentional with mixing this together. Next thing I did was everything was at 0, and I started to turn them down until they got balanced in a way that I think sounds pretty good. It was very sub heavy and bass heavy. You could see I had to turn that down the most. But again, because we're in the mix stage, it's fine. This is balanced together. This is balanced together. So every stem is balanced how I wanted it. Now we just got to make them balance together. This was at 0. This was our only sound we didn't turn down until I started mastering. And then I was like, okay, as we're mastering, the trumpets just needed to be ticked down just a little bit. So that's why it's at -1. But usually there's something left at 0 because we didn't need to turn it down. So balance is done. We could get into individuals. Didn't do anything on the effects. And on the vocals, the high end, so you could see 6,000 and higher, there was like a hiss. Just, it was a little harsh, and you could see on the peaks visually they were kind of poking through too much. And the goal of the mixdown, I just want to have everything a little more consistent before we get into the master. So that's where this de-esser came on. I'll show you how much it's clipping. Or not clipping, but compressing. So not too much. And then let's balance this track in place. And you'll see it just becomes more consistent. And we also, I didn't see on the utility, I did push it a little hotter into the de-esser to get a more consistent feel, to raise the lower volumes of the vocal. into the de-esser. So now you can see we're more consistent. Cool. On to the next one. Again, not too worried about going over the top and carving out lows and highs and this and that. Like, it's good to know all that. And if I need to fix that, I know how to come throw an EQ on and do that. It's not bugging me. The low end, there's not low end clashing right now. So why am I just going to do it, right? It could make, and what it was doing when I was doing that was I was making my songs very like hollow sounding because I was carving out too much lows and too much low mids of every channel on all 40, 60 channels. And we need overlap still. So if you're too clean, that's also the downside. So you can see there was no EQing. The problem, I need to control the peaks on the high end frequencies. Check. Cool. We're consistent. Then to the drums, I had an imager on here, and then I had a dynamic EQ. Again, probably just controlling the mid punch, like the 150 area of a kick, I would have to assume. But I don't have it, so I can't confirm that. And then squashing it with parallel compression. Now, through this, mostly the imager, when I cleaned up the like basically snare, clap, and kick and monoed it out, it freed it up and they did get a little louder. So the compression was a little more than what you're going to see here. But the intention was these peaks and where it builds up, I just wanted to control them a little bit. And then also, again, control the stereo width. We need the kick and snare to be driving and punching and basically holding the whole song. So we want to make sure those are well contained and have a good balance and energy consistent throughout the track. So let's bounce this in place. Again, it's not going to be what it was the final. As we get into my new projects, we'll have the plugins to deeper dive a little bit, but all right. So you could see this was like a more ramp right here. It controlled those peaks, and again, without those other two, we're not going to get the full picture. But right here, you can kind of tell what we were going for with that controlled dynamics, but it was a parallel. So we are letting those peaks still come through. We just wanted a more consistent energy of the track. So we have solid bass foundation that is consistent in the song, and we'll let the dynamics kind of breathe on top. All right, so the trumpet and strings, the reason why they're separate is A, they're just different sounding instruments. B, they are instruments. C, these were real recordings of these instruments put in a sampler in Contact. I'll link it down below so you can check it out. So I was trying to keep this real and organic as possible. So their own channels, not too much compression or anything. You could see it. I'm just letting it be a natural instrument. We pan this to the side. These strings, nothing special, right? There's probably some EQing on the actual production of the song, but just wanted them to be as natural as possible and let it go. Now you'll see the panning on the trumpet, I believe, and this is what I do now. So I can't speak on this move specifically, but what I do is I look up a map of a stage of a full orchestra, and then I believe the trumpets are on the right. I'm trying to picture it. I can't right now, but I think they're off-centered of the stage. So that's where I got the panning from. Again, I don't know if that's why I did it here, but that's how I treat any instrument that's like in a staged orchestra. I try to kind of give it that natural placement and feel as if it was in an orchestra. But that's just me. You can mono this out, distort it, do whatever you want in your music. Then I have my lead group on here, little saturator, imager as well. And then the dynamics is not doing too much. Again, with the imager, it might have freed up the low end a little more to compress. But again, I'm just trying to get it more consistent by the time we get into the master chain. So I'm not trying to create world peace on this lead. I'm just trying to get it a little more consistent, a little more peaceful, knowing the master is where we'll try to solve for world peace. So just barely clipping the things. We're also getting more energy because of that slight saturation. It was only at like 30%, so not doing too much, just adding more energy, color, and drive to the leads. Then we have the ARPs. These are to be in the background and support the track, not so much be a lead. So the imager is just widening it and making it sit in the song and not be on top of the song, if that makes sense, or like in the middle of the song. Just trying to fill up the song with these pads and ARPs, and that's what the imager. All right, now we're back to the bass, and on the leads, I'm gonna put an EQ on here so I could show you what I mean. So first things first, mono, we have our throughput, just the raw audio of the stem. Then I have a bass compression that's parallel on top of it that is squashing the sound. And then we're layering it in until it gives it just enough energy, just enough aggression that I wanted in the song. And then it's also giving us that solid foundation because it is a super compressed layer we're layering in. Last, we have we're cutting off the low end below 20. You could leave it. Sometimes you don't even notice the difference, but it's just in the habit of what I was doing, so I do it. And then we're taking off the high end where the hi-hats, the effects, vocal, lead, ARP pads would fill in. We're just making sure that bass gets set under and behind the track and not having it be so forward with this high-end air and stuff. And then lastly, the Pro L was just to give it that squashed, consistent driving feel. I don't have it on here. If you want to check out Pro L, I do have a new one, but we're not trying to get technical. If you need a limiter, Pro L is what I use on everything. I love it. All the plugins are linked down below. So we're going to bounce this in place. Again, without the Pro L, it's not going to give you that same effect that was what it was, but just so you could see what it does. Okay. And again, without that Pro L, we're going to get more dynamics, and that's because we're layering it in. Things are going to start to stack frequency-wise in certain areas, so we get a little more peaks. But that's where that Pro L came in, is basically come in and chop all that dynamics down to here, so that way we have a much more consistent and solid track. And if you want, I'll do it with just a limiter real quick. So something like that. We're going to rebounce the track in place. Again, if I was really doing it, one, I would have my speakers up a little louder so I could actually hear, and I would be more detailed. There you go. So basically, just re-controlling the peaks, getting a more solid bass. Now, so I had that EQ on here that was dipping. It was dipping around somewhere right here. like 2 dB. And the reason for that is if we go to the leads, check out where the lead is sitting. And a lot of the times in the past, I would probably turn the leads up because I was like, I can't hear them. It's fighting with the bass. Well, ding, 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 they're fighting with the bass. That doesn't mean turn it up to be louder than the bass. They're fighting with the bass. So that's why I took this area. I think it was a little tighter or something like that. I just took it down 2 dB. So the main frequencies of the lead could shine a little bit better. So now it sounds louder, but really we're just taking sound away from the bass that was fighting that same region. So that's what I mean. Just being intentional and simple with your things is going to give you a way better sound quality than being over technical and just throwing everything at your track. All right. We are done with the mix. It sounds balanced. It sounds good. It's time to give it that loudness and final polish that makes it sound like one finished product and not a bunch of different layers. My process is a little different now. I don't have a lot of these plugins anymore, so my chains look different in my new projects that we'll get into when we get to those. But start with the imager. Now I want to control the frequencies of the whole song together and kind of make sure the lows are monoed, low mids are less mono, like a little more wider. The mids are wider, and then the highs are really wide to give it that sparkle, polishy, finished touch on top of the song, right? We're going to do another parallel compression, layer it in. Again, it's electronic music. We want a solid, consistent, punchy bass to the song while still having dynamics in certain places without it just being a brick. Then I had this EQ. It's a color EQ. So anytime you're boosting frequencies, try to use a color EQ. I think I have a different one I can link down below. If it's not there, I'm sorry, but just search up color EQs. And basically what it is when you're boosting frequencies, it's adding color to it. So it's not just raising the volume of the frequencies that already exist in the sound, it's coloring it with a little more as you're boosting it. So it adds color, it adds excitement, adds some sparkle, some high-end little, I don't know, it's just nice little polished stuff. Then the Nova, I was taking away frequencies. So it was a dynamic EQ, and basically, I believe on this one, it was just the mud area, 150 hertz, 200 area, somewhere in there. I just wanted to compress it a little bit and be more consistent because it was being overwhelming in certain areas of the track. Then we went to the exciter. I needed a little more high-end air, sizzle. That's what the exciter came in. Basically, the easiest way to explain it is a color EQ is an EQ with a little exciter on top of the knobs. Then we did more stereo imaging. I don't use this anymore, but this was like a really in-depth, you could get really detailed on your stereo imaging. Don't do that anymore, but that was why this was here. I think, again, it was just air. I was trying to get the high-end 10,000 hertz really wide and airy to give it that, I always call it like a high-end rich sound, like a expensive sound. But it just gives it that polish for the finished song. Then I had this multi-band, basically a Pro L with different frequency bands. Again, these two things were in my experimental stage. I don't use them anymore. I was probably just trying to detail the low end, the sub, and get it more consistent before going into the Pro L. So that way the Pro L wasn't focused fully on compressing the sub and messing up, just giving it a weird pumping feel because it was too dynamic getting squashed into the Pro L. So again, just trying to get closer to world peace, world peace, world peace. And then finally that Pro L, give it that extra volume to really make sure world peace is understood and learned. And then you just got a spectrum analyzer so you can see the frequencies and try to get a more clean ramp of a song. So that was longer than I wanted, but I'm not trying to hold anything back. Trying to just dump my thought process, why I do things, and keep it as simple as possible. So that way I can inspire and help and educate people who want to make music and have them be technical, but be intentional with the technical skills and really just keep it simple and focus on the writing. Because at the end of the day, gotta have a good written song before it could sound good. Because if you have a bad written song and it sounds good, no one likes the song anyways. So make sure the writing's good, and then the sound, it's like that polish on top, the frosting, the cherry on top of your song that you wrote. So hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Click that thumbs up. We're going to go through all my projects in order. And as we get into my new ones, we'll have the newer plugins and everything. Any plugin that I have a link down below, you could check it out. If I forget one, comment and I'll help you out, or just search it. You can find it. As always, go make good music. Go make people feel good with your music. Make them feel something, inspired, whatever. Just go create, even if it's just for fun. Have fun with it, and talk to you next time. Peace.